Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Keyser. This is the Son of Man Urantia Project. Today we continue Chapter 18, The 12 Apostles, with Part 4 of 5, from Son of Man Urantia, The Life and Teachings of Jesus from the Urantia book. Grab your copy on Amazon, hit like and subscribe if the Master's light is touching your heart, and then sit back and marvel at the most thrilling story to ever unfold in the cosmos. Chapter 18, The 12 Apostles, Part 4 of 5, Matthew and Thomas. Matthew Levi. Matthew, chosen by Andrew, was the seventh apostle. He came from a family of taxmen and was himself a customs collector in Capernaum, where he lived. Matthew was married, 31 years old, and had 4 children when he joined the group. Jesus never gave Matthew a nickname, but before long, the others started calling him the money getter or something to that extent. Matthew was moderately wealthy, the only one of the apostles who was. He was a good businessman and naturally gifted with the ability to make friends and to get along well with many different types of people. Because of these traits, Andrew put Matthew in charge of their finances. He was the apostles' spokesman when it came to raising money from the wealthier citizens. Matthew, keenly perceptive of human nature, excelled in outreach, his intense sincerity fueling his ever-deepening faith in Jesus and the kingdom of heaven's certainty. Even though his duties finding money meant he was not in on all of the best of Jesus' talks to the others. Matthew's strong point was his complete devotion to the cause. He was intensely loyal to Jesus and devoted to his job of filling the treasury. Matthew was overwhelmed that he, a taxman, had been accepted by Jesus and the apostles. Yet, the apostles initially struggled to embrace a publican like Matthew within their fellowship. This was especially true with Simon Zelotes and Judas Iscariot. Matthew persevered despite his past, and in time, all of the apostles became proud of him and his efforts for the kingdom. Matthew's weakness was being short-sighted and materialistic, although these traits lessened as time progressed. What Matthew most admired about Jesus was his forgiveness, and he constantly kept in mind the fact that faith was the only thing needed to enter the kingdom of God. For Matthew, and this was how he told it to the others, he was now in the business of finding God. Matthew was one of the apostles who took notes on Jesus' lessons, and these were the basis of Isidore's later account that became known as the Gospel according to Matthew. Over the ages, Matthew's life as a businessman and tax collector has led many thousands of other politicians and public officials into the kingdom of heaven. Matthew's presence among the 12 flung wide the kingdom's gates, welcoming countless outcasts and despairing souls who believed their hope of salvation lost. Yet Jesus embraced them all. While Matthew freely took donations from Jesus' disciples and others who came to hear Jesus speak, he never went out in public asking for money. Most of his fundraising was done in secrecy, and he received most of the money from a small group of wealthier believers in the kingdom. Over time, Matthew also used all of his own savings to support the apostles. But they never knew about this because he did not tell them. He was worried they would think his money was tainted. Instead, he donated his money in someone else's name. And there were times when, rather than going out and asking for money, he stayed and listened to Jesus' teachings, knowing he had to make it up out of his own pocket. Matthew never did let the apostles know that it was his money keeping them fed most of the time. He kept it secret even though he was more or less on probation with the others at the start of the mission, and he wanted them all to know what he was doing for the cause. Matthew's heart burned to let Jesus know all about this, little realizing that Jesus was already aware of his efforts and generosity. When the persecutions began and everyone had to flee Jerusalem, Matthew headed north, preaching the gospel and baptizing believers in Syria, Thrace, Galatia, Bithynia, and Cappadocia. None of the other apostles ever knew what became of him. In Thrace, at Lysimachia, a group of unbelieving Jews conspired with the Romans to kill him, and Matthew died confident in his faith in God. Now a quick word from the heart. If this is resonating with you, if it's stirring something deep, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share with someone who might need this light. Peace on earth starts with us serving humanity for the sake of God, at home and beyond. Your simple actions help to spread the Master's truth. Thank you. Now back to chapter 18, part 4. Thomas Didymus. Chosen by Philip, Thomas was the 8th apostle. He was married, 29 years old, and had 4 children. In the past, he had been a carpenter and stonemason, but when he joined the apostles, he was fishing out of Tarikia, a small village on the west bank of the Jordan, where it flows out of the Sea of Galilee. Thomas was not well educated, but he was the leading citizen of his town. Coming from excellent parents who lived in Tiberias, he had the one truly keen and analytical mind of the 12. This was Thomas's most impressive strength. He was the real scientist of the apostles, logical and skeptical. But while he has been known as Doubting Thomas, the apostles hardly ever saw him as a trifling skeptic with his courageous loyalty. Thomas's home life as a child was not good. His parents were not happy being married, and this affected Thomas's adult life. He tended to be disagreeable. As a matter of fact, even his wife was glad to see him join the apostles, happy that her pessimistic husband would be away from the house most of the time. Thomas was also suspicious, and this was his Achilles tendon. In the beginning, Thomas made Peter so mad that he went to his brother, Andrew, and complained that Thomas was mean, ugly, and always skeptical. Yet, as the other apostles came to know Thomas, they grew to cherish his steadfast spirit. He proved himself to be superbly honest, sincere, courageous, and unflinchingly loyal. Still, he had grown up a real pessimist, and he found fault in almost everything. By the time Thomas became an apostle, he had lost most of his faith in humanity, and his superb mind had become cursed with skepticism. But once he met Jesus, his disposition began to transform for the better, even though he never overcame his mistrust throughout his life on earth. Andrew entrusted Thomas with overseeing the Itinerary, a role he fulfilled with meticulous precision. He was a good executive and an excellent businessman. But Thomas was also handicapped by his many different moods. He would be one man one day and another man the next, even if he did improve over time. Jesus enjoyed his long personal talks with Thomas. As an apostle, Thomas offered profound solace to honest doubters, embodying Jesus' embrace of all, despite their uncertainties. Thomas encouraged many troubled minds to come into the kingdom, even though they could not understand all of Jesus' spiritual and philosophical teachings. Thomas revered Jesus because of his matchless symmetry and his superbly balanced character. The fact that Jesus was so just yet so merciful. Thomas admired that Jesus was firm, but never obstinate, calm, but never indifferent, tender, but never vacillating, positive, but never rough or rude, strong, but at the same time gentle, pure and innocent, but at the same time virile, humorous and playful, but free from levity and frivolity, truly courageous, but never rash, forceful, or foolhardy, helpful and sympathetic, but never meddlesome or dictatorial, and a lover of nature, but free from all tendency to revere nature. Intellectually, Thomas probably appreciated Jesus more than any of the 12. In the discussions between the apostles, Thomas was the conservative. He was cautious and focused on safety first. He would debate something as being foolhardy and presumptuous to the bitter end. But if Andrew put it to a vote and he lost the argument, he was the first to say, "Let's go," and fearlessly head out to do whatever had been decided. Time and again, Thomas would argue against Jesus exposing himself to danger. But if Jesus decided to do it anyway, it was always Thomas who rallied the other apostles by saying, "Come on, men, let's go and die with him." Thomas was a good loser. He didn't hold grudges. Thomas was in some respects like Philip, in that he always wanted to be shown. But Thomas's outward expressions of doubt were analytical, not merely skeptical. As far as physical courage was concerned, he was one of the bravest of the 12. Thomas had some bad days. He could be moody and downcast at times. He had lost his twin sister when he was 9 years old, and this sadness added to his temperamental problems later in life. When Thomas became melancholy, Peter, Nathaniel, and often one of the Alphaeus twins would help bring him out of it. In the beginning, Thomas received permission from Andrew to go off by himself for a day or two, but he quickly learned that when he was down, it was best to stick to his work and to stay around his friends. Unfortunately, when he was depressed, he would also try to avoid Jesus. But Jesus knew all about this and understood why he was harassed by doubts and occasional times of depression. Regardless, no matter what occurred in his emotional life, Thomas kept right on being an apostle, and it was always him who would be the first to say, "Let's go." Thomas is the heroic example of a person who has doubts, faces them, and wins. He was not a harping critic, and he had an impressive mind. Thomas was logical and became the acid test for Jesus and his fellow apostles. If Jesus and his work had not been true, it could not have held Thomas from the start to the finish. He had a keen and sure sense of fact and no tolerance for anything but fact. He would have walked at the first sign of fraud. Know this: while today's scientists may not understand Jesus and his work on earth, there was a man who lived and worked with Jesus and the others who had the mind of a true scientist, Thomas Didymus, and he believed in Jesus of Nazareth. Thomas struggled during the days of the trial and crucifixion. He despaired for a time, but rallied his courage, stayed with the apostles, and joined them to welcome Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. Thomas gave the apostles good advice after Pentecost, and when the persecution scattered the believers, he went to Crete, Cyprus, Sicily, and the North African coast, baptizing believers and preaching the kingdom of heaven until the Romans caught him and killed him in Malta. Thomas had just started writing his story of the life and teachings of Jesus a few weeks before he died. Okay, folks, that was part 4 of 5, chapter 18, the 12 apostles. Up next, part 5, coming soon in the playlist. Hit like and subscribe. Grab your copy of Son of Man Urantia on Amazon, and let's all live out Jesus' message of love, mercy, and forgiveness, uplifting one heart at a time. Bobby Keyser, out here.